We're in Spain for the launch of the new V-Strom series. Today we've been testing the 650 completely on tarmac only. And they've made a few little updates to the bike this year. There's new color schemes. The design is designed to look more like the V-Strom 1000. There's little tweaks to the screen, and the engine makes a little bit more power. It's Euro 4 compliant now. The ergonomics where you sit down are a little bit slimmer than they were. But all in, it's kind of a pretty similar bike to what it was in the past. If you didn't ride them back to back, I don't think you'd notice much of a difference unless you're a V-Strom owner. But that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. We've had some incredible roads to ride over the course of today. Just endless twisty tarmac, and V-Strom has kind of outdone itself really. It's been a really incredible day's riding. As a road bike, it handles much better than you expect it to. It's much more nimble than I expect. It's much more planted in the corner. It's just really confidence inspiring bike. It settles in on the road really well. It doesn't really do anything you don't want it to. Yeah, it never really sits up or wobbles. The suspension's really planted. And that makes it a really fun bike to ride. I think the suspension for me is actually a little bit of a highlight of the handling on the road. Generally, with a more budget bike like this, it wallows a lot. It's kind of awkward, and when you brake hard or when you are a little bit aggressive in the turn, a lot of bikes are uncomfortable and they sit up and they squat and they sit up and they squat over and over. V-Strom doesn't really do that. It kind of just settles into the corner, and I think that's a really good thing. I think it's a surprising feature for a bike of this price point. It's got really basic suspension. It's not adjustable. It's preload only adjustable on the shock. But I don't really want to change anything on it. So yeah, for the kind of speed of the bike and what you want it to do, I think it's really fantastic. For someone of my size, the shock was a little bit soft to start with, and it felt like the bike was quite raked out, but I put a little bit more preload in. It was 5 clicks to start with, and it handled much better. It was much more settled. It turned in a lot more predictably. It didn't it was just much more comfortable. I went a little bit further again with the preload on the rear shock, and it got worse. So for me, my body weight's about 100 kilos in kit. Then yeah, 5 clicks of preload over standard was really good. The engine on the V-Strom is obviously a V-twin, is a 650 twin, and it's a fantastic engine for this class. It's so smooth to ride that it makes riding on the road, especially in twisty corners, really easy, because it picks up out of the corner smoothly. It rolls on really well. When you shut the throttle, it doesn't really do anything you don't want it to either. And that's a really nice feature of this bike as well, especially compared to some of the other bikes in the class. I think the engine is a real standout. It's much quicker than I expected it to be, much smoother than I expected it to be. The fuel injection's really well finished off. It rolls on well. It pulls really consistently all the way through the power curve as well. It is a 650, so it's not lightning fast. It's not the kind of power that makes you wet yourself with excitement and giggle all the way home. But it gets the job done really well. It's really easy to ride around car parks and so on as well. It kind of pulls itself along without having to use too much gas, so it makes kind of town life and maneuvering the bike in real world situations much easier than a lot of other road bikes. For 2017, the V-Strom has had traction control added to the electronics package as well. And it's a nice addition. It's not a necessary one, but what is really good is that the traction control works fantastically. It's got 2 modes, a kind of more intrusive mode and a less intrusive mode. For the most part, I rode it in the less intrusive mode 1, and I barely noticed it all day. Like it doesn't really kick in because you're riding on good tarmac with good road tires, and you never really got enough power going through the rear wheel for that to be a problem. But there were a couple of occasions where some of the back roads had a little bit of gravel, and then you can kind of force the traction control to kick in by being a little bit silly and putting the throttle on where you shouldn't. And when it does come in, it's super smooth. If you weren't looking at the traction light and listening for it, I don't think you'd even notice that traction control had happened. And that's a fantastic thing. And I think it bodes really well for if Suzuki do start to push into more off-road style bike as well, that they've got the technology there to do a really good job. The ergonomics, the riding position of the bike is really good. It's a little bit cramped for someone of my size. I'm about 6'2", and after a day, the riding position's a little bit cramped on the knees. You can get a higher seat, obviously, that solves that problem a little bit. I also feel like I'm quite out of the bubble on this bike. You can raise the screen by about a centimetre, but even so, I think it's, for someone of my size, it's a little bit lacking headwind protection. You kind of sit in that in between, but it's not horrendous. One of the other things they changed was the shape of the seat to kind of more match the 1000. So it's a bit narrower at the front, the bodywork's a bit narrower between your legs, and I really like the position that you're riding in all the time. It lets you get really far forwards on the bike, and it kind of doesn't make you feel like it's fat or hard to sit on. And I think if you're a little bit shorter person, that narrower profile is really going to help you out as well. There's a couple of things that other things that they've changed from the previous bike. The dash and clocks are completely different, and they're operated from a button on the controls, on the handlebars. It's a really nice system. It's very simple. It does the job. The controls are nice. They're simple to use. There's no complicated faff to turn traction control off. You can't turn the ABS off, but for most part, I don't think that's a problem. The only thing that I really kind of was a little bit disappointed with is I think the front brake lacks a little bit of feel. It is a kind of more budget bike, so it's kind of something to be expected that some things can't be as expensive components as a more expensive bike. And the brakes work really well. There's not a problem with the amount of power, it's just the front one feels a little bit dead. But it's a small problem in a $7 bike. As a whole package, the V-Strom's really surprised me today. I really enjoyed riding it. A little bit of that's helped by the fact that we're on awesome roads, and riding motorbikes is probably the best thing you can do on an awesome road. But it handles really well, and that makes it a fun bike to ride. It's not doing anything I don't want it to do, so it lets me ride to the potential of my own ability without kind of hampering me or kind of interfering with it in any way. It's not a bike that ever, I think, is going to force excitement on your face by going really fast or handling like the most incredible thing you've ever ridden, but it doesn't do anything badly. And I think that's kind of what the V-Strom is all about, really. I think that's what Suzuki want from it. I think that's what people that buy V-Stroms like. And if you like V-Stroms and you're interested in buying a new one, it is a little bit, it's a V-Strom almost the same as they always have been. And they're really good bikes and they're really good value. And I don't think anything's changed there, really.